Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I'm Bob Lessman, your worship associate for today's service. We gather together with our doubts as well as our convictions, with our fears and our hopes, with our failures and our aspirations, with our sorrows and our joys. Whether you're joining us today for the first time or you've been a member or friend for many years, we are glad that you're here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you're welcome. Our speaker today is UUCSV member Mark Lohr, who will ask and answer the question, Abraham Lincoln, closet Unitarian? Mark and his wife Sandy have been UUCSV members since 1999. They moved to the area from Northern Virginia following his retirement from a 32-year career with the U.S. Foreign Service. In addition to his active participation in our church, Mark has served on several Winchester city boards and nonprofit organizations, as well as the Film Society, which he founded, Magic Lantern Theater.
Good morning. Our opening words are from Martin Luther King Jr. A time like this demands great leaders, leaders whom the lust of office does not kill, leaders whom the spoils of life cannot buy, leaders who possess opinions and a will, leaders who have honor, leaders who will not lie, leaders who can stand before a demagogue and damn treacherous flatteries without winking. Tall leaders, sun-crowned, who live above the fog in public duty and private thinking.
Now, as Robert Hurt comes forward, let us all say together from our homes the words for chalice lighting. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. And I invite you to join me as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor. To these ends, we covenant one with another. Please join me in a moment of silence as we hold in our hearts all those in our nation and the world who are struggling and suffering from the challenges and losses related to the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic and educational disruptions, as well as systemic racial injustice and devastating weather events.
Sing in my heart.
Our words for reflection are from the 19th century Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing, who you'll be hearing more about during my message. It's entitled The Free Mind. I call that mind free which masters the senses and which recognizes its own reality and greatness, which possesses life, which passes life, not in asking what it shall eat or drink, but in hungering, thirsting, and seeking after righteousness. I call that mind free which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith, which opens itself to light whensoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven. I call that mind free which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse, which discovers everywhere the radiant signatures of the infinite spirit and in them finds help to its own spiritual enlargement. I call that mind free which protects itself against the usurpations of society and which does not cower to human opinion, which refuses to be the slave or tool of the many or of the few, and guards its empire over itself as nobler than the empire of the world. I call that mind free which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past, nor live on its own virtues, its old virtues, but which listens for new and higher monitions of conscience and rejoices to pour itself forth in fresh and higher exertions. I call that mind free which sets no bounds to its love, which, wherever they are seen, delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering, which recognizes in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children, and offers itself up a willing sacrifice to the cause of humankind. I call that mind free which has cast off all fear but that of wrongdoing, and which no menace or peril can enthrall, which is calm in the midst of tumults and possesses itself, though all else be lost. It is said that there are more books devoted to Abraham Lincoln than to any other historical figure except for Jesus Christ. He is generally ranked as our greatest president. Everybody wants a piece of Honest Abe. Why should Unitarian Universalists be any different? Lincoln's ambiguous religious leanings and his abolition of slavery encouraged the belief among many that he was a closet Unitarian. Many years ago, a now departed co-congregant, Darlene Crable, and I took a summer Sunday morning in the old church down the road to briefly discuss the proposition. Darlene played old Civil War songs on the piano. I talked for a few minutes. Lately, I've been using some of my free time to delve a bit more into the subject and to learn a bit more about Unitarian history. I realize that by inflicting what I've learned on you this morning, I risk running afoul of one of Lincoln's famous rules. "'Tis better to be silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubts." But onward. As for the question posed by the title of this message, Lincoln Closet Unitarian, short answer is no. Lincoln never joined any church or suggested a preference for any denomination. His private and public remarks on religion are elliptical and subject to interpretation. His parents, Southern Baptists, seem to have grounded him in a belief in Calvinistic predestination that remained with him in some form for his entire life. He was skeptical of Christian creed and theology. But following the second great religious awakening of the 1800s, and as a careful politician, he tried to avoid religious controversy. Running for Congress in 1846, he fended off charges of heathenism with a public denial that danced around the issue, stating in part, quote, "I am not a member of any Christian church, is true, but I have never denied the truth of the scriptures, and I have never spoken with intentional disrespect of religion in general, or of any denomination of Christians in particular, leaving the higher matter of eternal consequences between him and his maker. I still do not think any man has the right thus to insult the feelings of the community in which he may live." Spoken like a good politician. In fact, Lincoln was a fatalist. He believed in a distant, impersonal God. Human beings were tools of providential, unknown intentions and natural law. He would quote from Shakespeare's Hamlet, "There's a divinity that shapes our ends. Rough hew them how we will." But yet, all that said, Lincoln also believed in human progress. What is more, he proved flexible and innovative in finding paths for that progress. This helped to create an approximation between Lincoln and American Unitarians, which began in the 1850s and grew through the Civil War. The central cause was, of course, slavery and the horrors that it brought in the war. In the early 1800s, Unitarian churches had been dominated by the political leaders and merchant princes of Boston, who favored order and stability, not to mention cotton profits, over any disruption that might come from abolition. By mid-century, however, Unitarianism came under the sway of the transcendentalist leadership of abolitionists such as William Ellery Channing, Theodore Parker, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Henry David Thoreau, along with lesser-known but prominent Unitarian women of the time, such as Elizabeth Palmer Peabody, Margaret Fuller, and Julia Ward Howe, the last of these being the composer of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, as well as an ancestor of our own Minister Emeritus, Reverend Henry Tickner. Let's pause to consider William Ellery Channing in particular. Years ago, when Sandy and I were on a hardship foreign service tour in Newport, Rhode Island, don't ask, we belonged to the Channing Memorial Church there, a beautiful red brick building with Tiffany glass and a statue of William E. in front. I often wondered about his importance. Now I have a better idea. William Ellery Channing can be said to be the spiritual founder of modern Unitarianism. He served as a bridge from the entrenched Boston hierarchy to the Transcendentalists. He held slavery to be an absolute moral wrong. As early as 1830, he challenged church authority on the question, as when he wrote, "No sect in this country has taken less interest in the slavery question or is more inclined to conservatism than our body." Although he died well before Lincoln came to prominence, his views foreshadow many of those that Lincoln adopted to bring the country through the Civil War. One example is Channing's controversial refusal in his sermons to castigate slaveholders as, quote, evil, unquote. Perhaps, he argued, it would be fairer to view them as caught up in an evil system. In times far more divided and partisan than ours, believe it or not, Lincoln also avoided ascribing guilt or choosing up sides. His words from the second inaugural at the end of the war are emblematic. quote, each side looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and outstanding. Both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, unquote. In general, Lincoln and the transcendental faction of prominent speakers and writers often held parallel views. For example, both he and the liberal Unitarians looked to religion to undergird democracy and promote social reform in an increasingly diverse nation. They both supported economic progress as important for, indeed vital for, spiritual growth. Channing wrote, "There is a harmony between inward and outward improvements, and by establishing among them a wise order, all will be secured." Further, they both saw victory in the Civil War as opening the way to, quote, a more living moral union, unquote, in the words of leading Unitarian theologians. Lincoln's law partner in Springfield, William Herndon, was a frequent intermediary between Lincoln and Theodore Parker. The famous ending of the Gettysburg Address, quote, that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth, unquote, was largely borrowed from Parker. In fact, some UU historians, such as former UUA President John Burns, believe that Unitarianism reached its pinnacle of national influence during the Civil War. Lincoln's first vice president, Hannibal Hamlin, was a congregant at All Souls, D.C., as were the Secretary of State Seward, and several leaders in the Senate, including Charles Sumner, all ministered to by William Henry Channing, nephew of William Ellery, who also served as chaplain of the House of Representatives. We can't take this too far. The church that Lincoln attended off and on during his presidency was New York Avenue Presbyterian, probably largely in deference to Mrs. Lincoln. Any thought that he might have given to the Unitarian concept of free will was overwhelmed by his darkening vision under the strains of the war, its carnage and agony, not to mention the personal tragedy of the death of his young son Willie, rather strengthened his Calvinistic belief in an implacable God whose purposes become revealed only after the fact. Although even here, in those dark times, Lincoln had a joke. Don't pray that God's on our side. Pray that we're on his side. Nevertheless, if not a closet Unitarian, perhaps we can think of Abraham Lincoln as something of a fellow traveler. Why? Well, his rejection of creedal Christianity, his readiness to embrace those of all faiths as well as those with little faith, his belief in the natural rights of the individual, and in his support for the individual's quest for self-fulfillment against pressures of the community. He shared with the liberal Unitarians an unbending moral revulsion to slavery and support for emancipation. His commitment to human progress, set against and really contradicting his native fatalism, by operating on the belief that human beings can improve their own condition. And certainly, he affirmed and promoted the words of our second principle: justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Just look to the momentous closing words of the second inaugural. With malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and a lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. So, in a sense, maybe Abraham Lincoln was indeed a closet Unitarian, now Unitarian Universalist. He strove to transcend his fears and limitations. His earlier racial attitudes evolved to acceptance, indeed support for Black Americans as full citizens. He overcame his fatalism and worked to improve the everyday lives and aspirations of his fellow Americans. In so doing, and in the words of our fifth principle, he embodied the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. My conclusion is the commonalities between Lincoln and our Unitarian forebears provide historical encouragement for us to grow spiritually through an active and evolving response to the real world. As John Burns argues in Conflagration, his excellent book on the 19th century transcendentalists, we UUs share not a common creed, but rather a common heritage. In this context, Abraham Lincoln's relationship to Unitarianism, whatever it was, can serve as a beacon for us, both as Unitarian Universalists and as citizens. Amen and blessed be.
As Robert Hurt extinguishes the flame, let us say together from our homes the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The closing words are from the writer Alice Walker. To acknowledge our ancestors means we are aware that we did not make ourselves, that the line stretches all the way back, perhaps to God or to gods. We remember them because it is an easy thing to forget, that we are not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, or die. The grace with which we embrace life, in spite of the pain, the sorrows, is always a measure of what has gone before. The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and action. We hope you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org, which allows us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries, which continue while we are not able to be physically together. We also invite you to join our church community at noon at our virtual post-service gathering for joys and concerns, followed by our coffee hour conversations in smaller breakout groups. The Zoom link is found in your UUCSV email. Thank you for joining us today, and be in peace.
Good morning. My name is Blair Smythe, and I'm the director of the Nature Conservancy's Allegheny Highlands program. On behalf of us all here at the Nature Conservancy, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about our conservation work. We're very grateful to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley, both for your interest and for your support. Our flagship property in the northwestern part of Virginia is Warm Springs Mountain Preserve over in Bath County. We purchased this nearly 8,000-acre property back in 2002 to stitch together surrounding undeveloped public lands, including lands in the George Washington National Forest, with which we actually share a 13-mile boundary on the eastern slope of the mountain. The George Washington and Jefferson National Forest encompasses 1.8 million acres across Virginia and is the largest national forest in the eastern United States. A hallmark of TNC's program here is its close partnership with the Forest Service. They are the vanguard for road testing and deploying the newest science and conservation techniques for managing forests for climate resilience, which is a key strategy in our plans for the Appalachian Climate Corridor. We're working to ensure that these mountains at the edge of Appalachia remain a natural stronghold against climate change, and that the human and natural communities are supported, restored, and enhanced. Your generous donations this morning will support our conservation work here in Virginia, including prescribed burning, putting fire back on the landscape as it would occur naturally to help enhance forest health and wildlife habitat. It also will help fund a variety of scientific monitoring, including assessing bird and vegetation response to our controlled burns. Ongoing research into the ways healthy forests sequester carbon dioxide, which is a significant natural solution to climate change. It will also support public access for recreation in dozens of our preserves across Virginia. I invite you to come visit Warm Springs Mountain anytime, but the spring is an especially great time of year if you'd like to bird or you'd like to see lots of different wildflowers. Land protection. We have already protected almost 350,000 acres across the Commonwealth. In your neck of the woods, the Nature Conservancy played a key role in protecting Ogden's Cave and a 134-acre parcel that's now part of Cedar Creek and Belle Grove National Historic Park, which is also a beautiful place to visit this time of year. Thank you very much for your support of our work. We are humbled and very grateful.